Welcome and thank you for joining us. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. Today we celebrate, if you want to call it that, the recognition of something that in American history was one of the most devastating occurrences to happen on our own soil. And that is 9/11. That's right, it's 2013, and back in 2001, we have all probably remembered exactly where we were when this event took place. On the Beyond 50 radio program today, we're going to be talking with mystic healer Sonia Grace. She's going to be talking about the recognition of the anniversary of this event and sort of what the residue is and how we think and feel about what had happened and how this actually impacts who we are with inside of ourselves. I'd like to welcome to the program today Miss Sonia Grace. Sonia, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Dan. It's great to be back.
Now, what have you been up to these days? It's been a while.
Well, I've been, doing my usual, working hard and, helping people and speaking in various places around the world and, just working.
Now, what has that been like for you as you encounter people from around the world? Do you find anything that seems fairly consistent?
I do. There's a lot of consistency in that many people are being confronted with old core, I call it karmic pieces, old emotional wounding, stuff that has not yet been resolved, both from childhood but also from long time ago, way, way long time ago, past lives. And I see people struggling in such a way that it's different than it was 10 years ago. And they're struggling with these core components of stuff that hasn't been resolved. And I'm finding that when I work with people and we are resolving them, they're having these massive breakthroughs. It's like all of a sudden, everything's aligning the way that, of course, it's really spiritually meant to be.
Mm-hmm.
But it's been really difficult. There's a lot of people I feel who are struggling and having a very difficult time. And I've talked to you about this before. We've moved into this fifth dimension. And so the vibration is much higher. It's much more intense. And everybody's trying to adjust. And as we adjust, the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual bodies also must adjust. And that's where these old karmic pieces that have not been resolved are coming to the forefront, and a lot of times smacking people right up in the face.
No kidding.
Because they haven't dealt with something that's key to their evolution.
Mm-hmm.
We are evolving, whether we can really see that or not.
Yeah, in other words, the train's going to keep moving. You can jump on board or you can stand by, but you're probably going to get hit by the other train that's coming the other direction if you do.
Exactly.
Now, I know that last time you were on the program, you said 2013 was going to be one of those years that people were just going to get rock'em and sock'em. I mean, they were just going to get hammered. Now, tell us a little bit about how you came to that, insight.
Well, when I had that particular conversation with you, the message from my guides that I was receiving was the turbulence of what was going to take place as we adjust into the fifth dimension. And that this is something that I believe we're seeing. We're watching in all corners of the world a tremendous amount of turbulence and difficulty both in dealing with nature and what the earth is serving up and also in what humanity is serving up. Mm-hmm. And I find people on a deeper level, this is talking more on a soul-body level, people are being confronted by the duality in that they know innately there is a compass, there is an internal compass that guides us. Our soul has that internal compass of, what is good and bad, right and wrong. But when we're fully engaging our humanness, our energy into the duality of which we live in, we're struggling. We're really struggling because people are experiencing huge amounts of negativity, or they're completely blissed out, but they're blissed out while they're in the duality. So when they fall, the fall is just giant. Mm-hmm. It's not a true state of bliss because because something can rock their boat.
Right, exactly. I know about 5 years ago, and here's something really fascinating as well, that you had talked about, and this may seem a little off topic for the listeners here, but I need to have them understand that we're not talking about one of these carnival-type spiritual, insightful healers that's randomly throwing things and then all of a sudden coincidences kind of seemingly aligned and, oh, she was right. Mm-hmm. You really have been as far as I've experienced anyway, fairly accurate about what you talk about. And I wouldn't call them predictions in as much as what you would say insights into the reality of how things work. And you had about 5 years ago talked about a coming ice age. And interestingly enough, they are seeing record glaciers and ice sheets in the Antarctic. And so it has arrived. And when you really take a look at the weather, especially when it comes to the north central part of the United States and the East Coast, it seemed randomly and unusually cold at parts of the year that it wouldn't normally be that way. That's the one stage. Then you look at areas of South America, records of animals are dying from snow and the cold as well. And so I kind of wanted to bring that up because that's kind of one of them random off things that you don't hear other people that would be considered to be in your genre, if you will, talking about, and here it's actually happening just as you had talked about.
Well, and yes, the series that I do, Earthways, that Beyond 50 produces, is a really great example of where I go with that kind of information, because I feel that we are all innately connected to the earth. We must be connected to the earth. That's part of the human experience in being in a body. And what the big part that people are unfortunately missing out on is that if we're really connected to the planet and we're allowing that energy to come up through our feet, and the energy from Source, God, the universe, however you want to call that, coming down through the top of your head, and both of those energies igniting or meeting at the heart, that's the alchemy, that's the magic, that's the incredible experience that we all connect to, and we embody that, that divine love, that energy that we come from. And so being able to say to you 5 years ago, I see, an ice age coming, this is part of my connection to the earth. I'm listening to her. I'm listening to the trees. I'm listening to everything that happens outside. Every chance I get to connect outside, or even if I'm in the house, I'm listening. And, I had such a great confirmation yesterday. I went outside and, I just walked out the front door, and this giant, you know how ancient they look, this blue heron comes flying like just a couple feet right over my head, and I could hear the wings wafting, and I looked up, and in my native language I said thank you, and this great blue heron turned around, his head turned back and looked at me, and he actually went honk really loud, and it was so beautiful. It was one of those moments, where I felt nature connected with me, I connected there, and there was actually a communication, which was beautiful. So my point is yes, we can all tap into the earth and the earth's energy more. Unfortunately, I think people have gone in a different direction with that, and instead of honoring and receiving the energy, we've just tried to harvest things from the earth. Mm-hmm. And the example I give people, that I actually think is quite effective is, if someone came to you and said, well, I'm going to take, 5 pints of blood, and I'm going to take out, parts of your liver and a little bit of your kidney every day.
Right.
That's kind of what we're doing to the planet. Mm-hmm. And certainly a human wouldn't survive that.
No, they wouldn't tolerate it happening in the moment, that's for sure.
Yeah, right.
Now, when you were talking about this rising negativity and the violent energies that seem to be so prevalent this day and age, and it feels like it's something that's been snowballing really I guess for a couple of years, there was all the anxiety people seem to have around 2012 and this end of the mind calendar, and we certainly talked about that at length many times before its occurrence, and it was more encouraging what we were hearing here on the program and what people were experiencing. But here at 2013, it seems that, as you had mentioned earlier, this acceleration of reality, for instance, you can think a thought and almost see it produced right in front of you. Now, on the one hand, that can seem very discouraging if we're going to be in this negative cycle. Oh, the world's out to get me, or my boss doesn't like me, or I believe that my wife or my husband doesn't love me anymore, and sure enough, the next day you get, divorce papers, or you get the pink slip, or the next thing you're headed down the road, and it just, things just aren't working out, and you think, oh, geez, I just proved that to myself. Then you get into this cycle of thinking, over and over and over and over again, the reality is just going to produce and say, you're right, here it is again. But that could also go the other direction as well. Tell us why this is so accelerated. You say the fifth dimension. Maybe give a little more, I guess, insight or clarity as to what that means.
Well, we moved into a different vibration.
I see.
We were in the fourth dimension, and, for centuries we've been in the fourth dimension. It is a vibration that allowed us to indulge. We indulged in a lot of things. We indulged in taking stuff from the earth. We indulged in the 60s. We indulged in the wars. We indulged in a lot of stuff in the fourth dimension.
We truly lived like hedonistic Romans in togas, plucking from the grapes and enjoying ourselves.
Very much so.
With no real repercussions of what those immediate actions were causing. They down the road probably showed up, but now they're showing up almost immediately. You pluck the grape and a hole ends up in the ground.
That's right. And that fourth dimension had, a lot to do with, the same elements of the fourth chakra, which is, love. I mean, there was a lot of love and a lot of experience of love in that fourth dimension. Now we've moved into the fifth dimension, which is, again, very similar to the fifth chakra, and that, we're all a little more telepathic, we're all a little more tuned in, experiencing, knowing someone's going to call, and then the phone rings and they call. I mean, everybody's whole, auditory system is heightened and feeling more, connecting more. But if we're in resistance, if we're in some kind of denial of that, or we're in denial of our own feelings, or we're still not working through and dealing with the dysfunctional childhood that we had, or, past lives where we've had some really difficult things, if we're not dealing with that stuff, it gets really, really hard, because this fifth dimensional energy is like, the fourth dimension was, okay, you graduated, fifth dimension, you need to be doing your doctorate. And I personally, with the work that I do, I see a lot of people who are, both scrambling to get on board and hurry up and do the work, and then there's a lot of people who are in a great deal of resistance. And what I mean by resistance is that we come to a place where we recognize there's something we have not worked through or dealt with on an emotional, spiritual level. And we're willing to go in there and maybe look at something, but we reach a block, and then we're not willing to go past that block because it's been protected for so long. And many people have this. There's so many people who have experienced some form of abuse or neglect or abandonment or whatever in their childhood, that is literally the piece, the component that's blocking them from moving forward into every other aspect of their life. And these things have been amplified because we're in a higher vibration now. Back in the fourth dimension, fine, go to therapy, don't go to therapy, do drugs, drink, whatever, whatever it is, everybody just kind of got to breeze through, deal with it or not deal with it. Now we're in a time where it's like we have to deal with it.
Right.
And everything in the whole galaxy is in this mode. So the sun, which is not having any sunspots, or there's no, solar flaring going on, much of any. The sun is becoming like really quiet. It's being affected. The earth is being affected. And certainly our magnetic shields and everything that protects the earth they're weakening. That's being affected. You just brought up what's going on and, with the ice and possible ice age coming up. So we have all of these elements that are being affected. There's layer upon layer. Humans are the same way. We have all these layers that are affected by this energy. I have clients who call me, and when there's a solar flare, they have no idea there's been a solar flare, and they'll say to me, what's going on? The energy's so weird today. I feel really, off. I feel really uncomfortable. And, it's like people are that sensitive, but most people don't want to acknowledge that or deal with that. And we're living in a society that says, take this pill and it will all be better.
Right. The other thing, too, is when you talk about living in our society is, and this is kind of one of those things that will bring us to 9/11 here, is that we tend to feel that, especially in America, that we feel entitled to what we want. And it seems to have gotten to a point that we have forgotten what the old attitudes behind that were. Before, it was perseverance, it was persistence, it was hard work, and it was certainly staying focused on a dream of how what you do better serves the world. And as a result, success could almost be guaranteed. It may not happen next week, next year, in the next 5 or 10 years, but if you stayed true to your course, to who you were, and this is the old world, the immigrants who understood what you might call the labor of love. But we've moved into a time that simply just because we wish or ask for it. In America, we seem to feel that we're entitled to have this happen and become tremendously frustrated, and in most of the cases, quit before the magic actually happens. Now, with 9/11, you could certainly see, at least at first, the prevailing attitude of just that, how dare these people come onto our soil and do this to us. We didn't want to turn that mirror and realize what we've allowed the people who allegedly run this country were doing outside of the world to possibly cause a revibration or a repercussion like this. And again, there's no pointing fingers here, but it's really to look at this. But to me, the aftermath, and it took several years before the ripple effects actually started to shape, where people began to see clearly, wait a minute, were we really doing those kinds of things? And beginning to question as to, is this the way other people around the world look at us? And now we're actually, in reality, holding up a mirror and saying, how could we have allowed this to happen? This is not really who we are. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think there's a real split. I think there's a real split in consciousness. There's the people who have the consciousness of, an eye for an eye, and then there's the people who have worked on and take, care to evolve their consciousness into, well, I don't have to fight every time. Maybe I can actually approach this from a place of peace. And, we're dealing with that right now in our country. And, when I look back to 9/11 and what happened and the shock that this, level of entitlement that we're talking about experienced, it goes back to me every time to the universe is nothing but about being in balance. Our planet constantly is reshifting and maneuvering to be in balance. And because the duality exists in everything, there is going to be a state of balance that is being strived in everything that happens. So you've got, all of these things that are really good, and I'm not saying that just because something's good, something bad is going to happen, but if you're really investing your energy in the duality, it might appear that way.
Right.
If you're really investing your energy in the bad, oh my God, look what they did, and this is terrible and blah, 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 blah. Yeah, it is bad. Yes, we all invested our energy into it. It was hard not to. You know, it was all over the television. We were all completely, just mortified by what happened with 9/11. And I cried for days when this happened. But I want to say to humanity, we've all been here before. All of us have lived multiple lifetimes. All of us have been in war. Some of us come from places, other planets that have actually blown up and have that memory that we carry around. There's such a wide, vast populace of soul bodies here on the earth that are, very old, and we've all been through multiple, lifetimes and centuries together. And so this happening really was, to me, about more on a spiritual level, about what that soul group was definitely working on and needing to work through. And I have to tell you, Dan, that when I lived in New York after 9/11, I, just being who I am and being as sensitive as I am, I could not walk past any of the fire stations without just weeping. I mean, I would I would be in a completely different mood, happy, going to my work or whatever, and I would just start sobbing walking down the street. And I saw the people who had crossed over at the site. I could see them. They were walking. I talked to them. I helped a lot of them to the light. I worked constantly on that 9/11 site while I lived in New York, and it was very painful. But again, I'm a firm believer that if you get cancer or some kind of illness, it is meant to teach you something. It is meant to guide you to a new awareness. And 9/11 certainly did that for us. It guided us to a new awareness. It made everybody aware that, gee, maybe we're not liked around the world.
Well,
which is hard for Americans to accept because, we all tend to live in this bubble of, everybody likes us, we're okay.
Yeah. Well, go to France and try to be an American over there, and you'll start to understand sometimes some of the attitudes that are carried over there at times. But that's not to say that it'll be all bad, especially if you decide to come down off that high horse, if you will, and immerse yourself into the culture with a earnestness to understand and learn from them, and you'll find arms wrapped around you just about at every house you pass by, which is very encouraging, which is a lot like what our country is as well. And I think what's fascinating about something like 9/11 occurring, and that you, earlier we were talking about how a lot of us, many of us, are experiencing these negative and in some cases violent vibrations that are occurring almost immediately, is that what 9/11 did, you take a look at that as the negative energy coming through and sweeping America, not necessarily because Americans deserved it or they had this was their due, but what it certainly brought up when you think of politics and religion and culture, all wrapped together, is that all of a sudden now, here's where we're at in 2013. It's sort of like it's cleared the air. We realize now Oz does not have all this power that we once thought Oz did. In fact, we've pulled the curtain back and realized there's the wizard. He's completely without clothes, and the levers are squeaking, and they don't need oiling because they no longer work anymore.
Right.
And now what's interesting is that we're hearing the same message. It's almost as though our current administration reached back, pulled out a tape recorder from the Bush administration, pressed play, and now there's the chemical warfare issue again. And Americans are like, what do you think we are, stupid or something?
Right.
We've been through this before. This is what we want you to start thinking about doing now. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, again, it's because I tend to approach all of this, because of my work through a more spiritual perspective. I feel that this is yet another demonstration of how severe, how splitting apart the duality is. That things are either really bad and we're on the verge of World War III, or things are really good and we're all kind of in that, duality blissed out state. And so as it splits apart further and further, because we're going through this giant overhaul in the entire galaxy and universe, is we're all, I feel like we're on a boat and we're all running to one end of the boat, and the boat starts to tip up, and then we all run to the other end of the boat, and it tips up on the other end.
Mm-hmm.
We're trying to find the balance, and because people are living in different states of consciousness, it becomes more and more difficult to create balance. I watch these refugees from Syria who are camped out in every possible park or any little piece of land in Turkey trying to survive. They have no water, they have no food, there's no bathrooms. And I just, I just cried. I just felt so bad.
Mm-hmm.
That here we are, this planet, we are now a world community. We are completely related because we can connect around the world with each other. I mean, the Internet has just done an amazing thing for all of us having awareness of what's going on around the world.
Yeah.
And we have so many resources and ways to help one another, and yet we keep going back to these battles and these issues that become key and core components for why we're fighting, and that's oil, greed, money, all of these things that start wars, religion. and I feel like the earth, who is also a living being who's weighing in on all of this, she's going to have the last say. She's really going to have the last say because she's a lot bigger than the rest of us, and she could shake us off like a bunch of fleas if she wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
But with that lack of disrespect and humans standing up and puffing their chests out and saying, well, I'm this and I'm that and I'm going to do this is ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
There's no perspective as to who's really bigger here. There's no perspective, and there's no perspective on the planet and what the planet really is capable of doing, like you and I were just talking about, an ice age, massive earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and hello, let's not leave the sun out and what the sun is capable of doing. I feel like we really are. We've stepped out of the boat of humility that we once had, living tribally and really being connected to the planet, and that we've just gotten so far from connecting with the Earth's energy that we've, I think, a lot of humanity has kind of lost their minds.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think the other great thing, too, not that you want to consider a tragic event like 9/11 great, but when you see, again, its ripple effects, there's a lot of greatness behind it that we didn't see, at the time, but what we're seeing a lot of now, and that is the personal responsibility that's involved in what's happened here. You can take a look back at that. Hindsight always seems to be 20/20, but we take a look back and say, how, as let's say, an American citizen, how am I responsible for what happened here? It's easy to say, well, I wasn't part of the Taliban, and I didn't make these decisions that led up to this, but you did make choices that possibly led up to this, for instance, as we have began to slowly see, well, we're in a consumer society, I mean, here we are, we're barely, in the top 10 as far as world population and countries are concerned, but yet we use more than 1/5 of the world's natural resources, So you have to take a look at that personal responsibility there and realize, okay, maybe I was the construction worker that worked hard all day, and all I wanted to do was go home and allow the cable television to wash over me, and then go back to work the next day and do the same thing without finding the time or the energy to be actively involved in my community government, in my state government, to be actively involved, to tell these people whom I voted into office, this is what I want to see you doing. And so when you take a look at the personal responsibility that could have led up to something like this, you realize that as a single person, no matter how overwhelming, let's say, a world event like a 9/11 is, that it takes with a single step with what you do, with your day. Now, that being said, that there's also an encouraging side, as you said, the duality. So on the positive side, it's realizing I'm feeling pretty empowered that if I could step in that direction and be, a better contributor, selfless in my community, if I could be more actively involved in the local politics that are occurring, just give some of my time to do this, perhaps that ripple effect will cause greater effects in the group and in the larger group as a whole. Mm-hmm. Would that be a pretty accurate way to look at things like this?
Absolutely. I totally agree with you, Dan. And I think that wherever we can get involved, it's super important. I mean, I tell people, we're not equipped to run out and, save the whales individually. And if you want to save the whales, then certainly connect with an organization like Greenpeace that's doing just that and support them, because they have people on the front lines doing all that hard stuff and facing all of these difficulties in what they're doing and the work they're doing for the planet. And, there's petitions and, all kinds of different organizations that you can sign of really good people who are doing the work, and they're the ones lobbying and taking it to Washington, D.C. and, doing the things that need to be done. So there's lots of ways for people to get involved. And I always tell people, if anything, your involvement should be that daily you're sending your energy and your love into this planet. Mm-hmm. And you're seeing the love, the very powerful energy that's in your heart, filling up all of those areas of this earth that are hurting and diseased and have, need mending and healing. That people have that. That's our gift back to the planet, is that we're conduits. We're bringing that divine energy through, and we can heal her as well. Mm-hmm. But, for people to get overwhelmed, which most people do, I mean, God, most people just take, the issue of recycling, and suddenly everybody's eyes glaze over and they look like, they're completely overwhelmed, like, oh, no. And it's true. It is an overwhelming topic, but so is, something like 9/11 that happened. It's overwhelming. Mm-hmm. It's frightening. But it's taught us so much, and it I tell you, the hearts of New Yorkers and what I experienced with New Yorkers when I was living there, and the amount of connection and love and respect for one another was just tremendous. And it's those things, unfortunately, that happen in our lives that make us stronger, and make us more connected to each other. And I don't promote that they ever happen again, but I understand why they happen, because it's a part of this much bigger balancing act that we're in mm-hmm. the universe, and it doesn't always make sense, and no, I don't believe in a punishing God, but I do believe that that things happen for karmic reasons, mm-hmm. and that we have other karmic things that have taken place in other lifetimes that we carry with us, and when all the energies are in the right place and everything is aligned, there is a recreation of something karmically, and that's the energy of it, not necessarily the event. It's the energy of it. And so you take all of these people, all of these souls who have been in battle together, lifetime after lifetime, different countries, different parts of the world, and they all end up in a place together where there is some kind of convergence of energies. And if I feel that it would make more sense for people, maybe on an intellectual level, to understand things better if we looked at energy or a feeling as a vibration or a tone. So you've got joy going out of you. You're joyful, you're happy, and that's a C sharp. And then you've got anger coming out of you, and that's a D minor. And it's like all of these different feelings are like energy vibrations or tones, and they're interacting, they're intercepting each other, they're connecting. And it's there's a lot to be said about the group of Tibetan monks that sit in meditation all day and are very mindful and careful about their words and where they step and their actions.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're not.
Fascinating world that we live in, and it's again back to the personal, individual responsibility as to what actions do you take today that actually make this difference that you wish to see. And it takes a lot of personal responsibility, but the fact is that if you don't step up and get proactive in doing something about this, somebody else will, and you probably won't be pretty happy with the outcome because you surrendered that. Fascinating stuff. What can people do, I guess, when this negativity happens, or this devastation they seem to experience, or like in many cases what you were saying about this year, we're all going to get hammered. How do people really deal with that?
Well, there's lots of ways of dealing with negativity. One is to recognize that when we get negative or we allow negativity to pull us down, we lower our vibration. So we need to raise our vibration. There's lots of ways to do that. Meditation would be my number one pick. Secondly, your favorite music. And thirdly, a really great movie that you love and you feel good when you're watching it. Or exercising, yoga, dancing, anything that's going to raise your vibration will help. Now, if you're in such a negativity and you're going, oh, my God, I just can't get out of this and I feel terrible, the first thing I would say is call me. You need to have a session with me. But secondly, I encourage people to burn cedar safely. Don't burn your house down, but get a coffee can or a bowl or something you can burn in, and get a small sprig of cedar and light it on fire, just enough to let it kind of create a flame and then blow it out so you can use the smoke. And just take that smoke over your body, over your head. People out there who say, oh, I burned sage today and I cleared my space. What they don't realize is that sage is used to bless things. So basically they're just blessing the negativity. In native culture we use cedar. So cedar is what's meant to clear things. We use sage to bless something. So burn cedar. That clears negativity really well. And then also, I always ask, for the universe when I'm in my prayer, my meditation, to clear the negativity from my auric field. People can ask for that in their prayer. Ask for the angels to come and clear any negativity around them. There's lots of things that we can do, but investing in that negativity more, buying into it more, investing our energy into it more is going to really, create more karma for yourself. That's what keeps the whole karmic wheel turning. Is we're just creating more and more by investing our energy into it. So in respect to 9/11, I think we have to really look at the whole investment of energy that we all did heavily invest our energy. We felt so horrible and so bad for all of these people that were there and people who died. But now, years later, that we're grounded, we're grounding our energy. We can view this tragedy as from a place of, what did I learn from this? What did we learn from this as a nation, as a world community? What did we learn from this? Because we're not the only ones on the planet that have had some kind of terrorist attack. And quite frankly, I mourn for all of the people around the world who have had to go through something like that.
Fascinating stuff. Always a pleasure to have you on the program because you always give real, very clear insights as to what's going on and what people can do about it. And certainly, when you think of the universe as a whole, you realize, especially for anybody who has ever studied astronomy, that there's a lot of chaos out there. And then in the chaos, there seems to be order that emerges. And I remember hearing, and this was just a couple of weeks ago, I was kind of flipping through the channels, and there was a person that was talking about how to overcome discouragement, and said one of the most interesting, simple things that I had heard that can make sense of all this. And he simply says this: just if you can understand this, then things may get a little easier for you, especially when it comes to discouragement. And he simply says, disappointment is inevitable, but discouragement is a choice.
That's great.
So now people can make a choice to get out of their discouragement by going to your website, which is?
My website is Sonja, SONJA, Grace, GRACE.com. And I have a really fantastic meditation retreat coming up in Joshua Tree Retreat down in California, October 18th, 19th, and 20th. So be sure and check that out, because I'm really promoting that people have the experience that we move into a time where we're experiencing our bodies, our feelings, our energy, instead of maybe doing the easier way, which is to sit at the computer and read about it and then imagine, okay, so this is what this is and this is how this works. So I'm really going for, experience this and join me for my meditation retreat.
Absolutely. I know that you have to run, but we want to thank you so much for being on the program today. It's always a pleasure to have you share the insights that you have and hopefully not only awaken but enlighten our listeners to, again, take action and, as you just said, experience the world rather than passively live in it. Thank you again, Sonja.
Thank you, Dan.
We want to thank you, the listeners out there as well. Be sure to join us at beyond50radio.com. That is the number 50. We will have a hot link up for you so you can find out more about Sonja Grace. We want to thank you for tuning in. This is Beyond 50. I'm Daniel Davis, and remember, live your day past halfway.